Afternoon Neapolitan session, access to freely available journal articles, gold, green, and rogue open access across the disciplines. My name is Bobby Hollandsworth. I'll be your moderator this afternoon. What we'll do is we'll have 35 minutes with our panelists here, and then we'll open it up at the end, 10 minutes of questions. Our speakers are Michael Levine-Clark, Dean and Director at the University of Denver Libraries, Jason Price, Director of Licensing Operations at SCELC, and John McDonald, Associate Dean for Collections at the University of Southern California. Please help me welcome our panelists.
Great, thank you. We're exploring the access and discovery to freely available articles. And we're deliberately looking at not just open access content, but anything that is freely available to a user on the web, right? So from a user perspective, they might care philosophically whether it's open access versus something that they're getting pirated access to, but the reality is that they may often not even know that which type of access it is. So we're looking at gold open access, green open access, and rogue and pirate open access, stuff that maybe you shouldn't quite have access to. The library, we know, for many users is not the starting point. A recent Ithaca report, as well as the New Media Consortium Horizon report, have both talked about this issue, that users start very often from Google Scholar. They don't start from library sources. And the Ithaca report talks about the fact that while discovery services for students are often important, much more often they are starting their searches from other places, from the open web. And we've got data that backs that up. This is referral data to a particular publisher. The pie chart is the University of Denver, my institution, and this is almost a year's worth of data for a particular publisher, and this is to the licensed content that we have at the University of Denver. 39% of the referrals to our content, to this publisher's content, came from our library discovery services. So from the discovery service, from the resolver, from the catalog, from databases. So library tools, broadly speaking. 61% came from other places, right? So 32% came from Google and Google Scholar together. 29% were not, or 27% were not sure where it came from. There's no clear originating source. But the key there is that for users, very often they're getting to our content from sources that are not the library or not library-specific sources. The pie chart is equivalent to this particular bar chart on the graph. So these 6 bars are 6 different institutions. University of Denver is one of them. And the bold content at the top, or the bold sections at the top, are the library originated referrals. And you can see in the green, the blue, and the red at the bottom, the stuff that's coming elsewhere. Most of these referrals at these 6 institutions are coming, again, from outside the library. They're not coming from library discovery services or the library catalog. And people are getting to content in a lot of different ways. And one of these ways is ResearchGate. ResearchGate, as I think most of us know, is a sort of a social research tool where people can post content, people can share content, and people can ask for content. So there's metadata about this particular article in ResearchGate, but there's also an icon where a user can request that full text. I'm a member of ResearchGate, many of us are, and one of the sort of annoying features of ResearchGate is that you get a lot of email from them asking you to post stuff. Right? So I've got a bunch of notifications here from people who want me to post something. ResearchGate doesn't help you determine whether you have the rights as an author to post a particular article. And very often, the things that get posted on ResearchGate are not versions of the article that should be made freely available. They are rogue open access. And then there's SCIHub. SCIHub is a tool that's out there with articles that are pirated from all sorts of different sources. SCIHub has been quite in the news, including this really detailed study of usage and the sort of the history of it that was in Science magazine last year. And one of the things that was really interesting about this study is the number of people coming from what you could call legitimate places where they have legitimate access. So from institutional sites, they're going to SCIHub even though they're at universities that have access to a lot of this content. And one of the things that's interesting is that they tell us that they're going there for convenience. So whoops. I'm not very good at using the, oh well.
The orange bar.
Huh?
The orange bar.
Yeah, that's what I did.
No, the orange bar.
The orange bar.
The orange bar on the slide. Sorry.
Right. I was looking for the laser. But the orange bar on the slide, right, the 23% and the 17%, the convenience factor. So for combined, 40% of the users say that they come to SCIHub even though they may have access, right? So 51% say they come because they don't have access. 17% say that they use SCIHub because it's more convenient than the library or other sources they have access to. 23% say they object to the profits of publishers. That 40% probably has access, but they're choosing to use SCIHub anyway. And this is of 11,000 researchers, a survey. 88% of those surveyed said that they don't actually believe that it's wrong to download pirated papers. So that's an issue that we should all be concerned about, right? That they are using SCIHub and they don't care that it's pirated. They're using SCIHub even though they probably have access in other ways. A recent study shows that in 2013, we actually passed the 50% point for open access content on the web. In April of 2013, 50% of the articles that had been published, or peer-reviewed articles that had been published in 2011, were available in some form of open access, green or gold, on the web. So we decided to investigate sort of the broad availability, green, gold, rogue, and pirated meaning on SCIHub, of freely available article content. We randomly selected 300 articles that were indexed in Scopus and published in 2015. 100 of them from the arts and humanities, 100 of them from the social sciences, 100 of them from the life sciences, all of them, again, randomly selected. We'll be talking about a few definitions sort of as we go through, and I want to just be clear what we mean by these things, by these terms. So availability means the presence of full text in one of these in a free version, right? That we found some full text freely available on the web. We didn't have to log in any way. We searched in 4 different locations. So our search locations were Google Scholar, Google, ResearchGate, and SCIHub. Again, two open sources, ResearchGate, which is sort of rogue in that publishers or authors can deposit a version of the article that may not be a true open access version, and then SCIHub, where content is pirated. We looked at 4 different access types across these search locations. There's gold open access, which we defined very broadly as any version that we could get to a free version on the publisher's website. Green open access, we looked in institutional and subject repositories as well as on author websites, discoverable through Google or Google Scholar. A rogue version is anything that we found in ResearchGate. We did not try to go into ResearchGate and determine which things were legitimate open access versus rogue. So we're just saying if it's on ResearchGate, it's rogue. Pirated is anything on SCIHub. And again, on SCIHub, some of it is actually open access content. Some of it is content that should not be available. We searched each article by title in Google Scholar and in Google. We just did a title search. We didn't do anything further than the title search. We counted the access types. We counted in Google and in Google Scholar whether it was available in gold or green or rogue. So in many cases, Google Scholar turns up ResearchGate or academia.edu results. We counted the number of title match results in each. We counted the number of results with available full text. How many things could we find full text for when we were not on our campuses using our licensed content? We then searched each article title again in ResearchGate, because sometimes ResearchGate turns up in Google Scholar, sometimes it doesn't, so we searched directly in ResearchGate as well. We searched in SCIHub, and then we measured the title match versus the freely available full text results. So we gathered a bunch of data, and now John's going to come up and talk about some of our results.
Thanks, Michael. This is the best part of the presentation, so I'm the lucky guy that gets to give you guys all the results. For access type, again, Michael told you access type, or in other words, the source of the full text article, whether it was green, gold, rogue, or pirated, was our first set of results. Oops. So as far as green, gold, and gold, green, and rogue, we had just a few simple research questions. Basically, how many are gold out of our article sample? How many are green? And then where are they green? Are they green in institutional repositories, subject repositories, or on author websites? And then how many are in the rogue and the pirate systems? So for rogue systems, we did ResearchGate and academia.edu, and for pirated, it was SCIHub. And a note about academia.edu, you can't search it directly, so we only got results through Google results. So you'll see the results in one of the next slides. So here's the verdict. Out of our sample, articles available in gold OA, we found that a total of 80 out of our 300 articles were available gold OA on the publisher's website. That's 26% of the sample. And across the disciplines, it ranged from a non-surprising 23% in arts and humanities up to 32% in the life sciences. And then for green OA, the articles available, green OA, overall we found that institutional repository green OA accounted for 9% of the articles were found in institutional repositories. That was relatively surprising to us that, that institutional repository copies were not as discoverable as we expected. Subject repositories were a little bit better, but still not great, at 14% overall. And not surprisingly, probably to all of the librarians in the room, the author website self-archived were not very discoverable at all. We only found 10 articles out of our sample in total. As far as our rogue systems, ResearchGate and academia.edu, we found that 30% of the total sample was available via ResearchGate. And arts and humanities is not very discoverable in ResearchGate or accessible in ResearchGate as open access versions. But the social sciences ended up with 36% and life sciences 44%. So probably what everybody would expect. As far as academia.edu, again, I didn't put a percentage in the table here because we weren't accessing academia.edu directly. So there could be additional items in there that are open access, but this is what we got from our Google and Google Scholar results. And overall, the total for both of these rogue systems together were 111 articles, so 37%. And the grand total for all open access sources ended up being 166 of the 300 articles we could find at least one version of an open access article. So arts and humanities was just below 50%, social sciences very high at 60%, and then life sciences at 57%. And these results match the earlier research results that have been published in the literature that right about 50%, 50 to 60% of recently published literature is available in an open access form. So to contrast that with SCIHub, we searched all the articles in SCIHub, and we came up with an astounding 87% of the articles were available in SCIHub. And equally across all the disciplines. So we found 86 of our articles in arts and humanities were available in SCIHub, 87 in social sciences, and 87 in the life sciences. Looking at this availability then as a bar chart on one slide, you can see then that gold open access via publisher websites, we ended up with 80 of the articles total. Green open access in all locations was not as available as gold open access, but ResearchGate in the blue bar and ResearchGate and academia.edu actually performed pretty well with 111 of the articles. Overall, the arts and humanities is not well served by ResearchGate and academia.edu, but pretty comparable in gold open access at least. The life sciences have higher percentages, as most people would expect, but the social sciences perform pretty well, especially in ResearchGate. Then we added the black bars here to show those compared to SCIHub, and you can see that 260 total articles, the 86, 87, and 87 across the three broad disciplines. Now those are the total articles. We wanted to also look at the additive availability by the article source. So for example, gold open access, we found 80 articles by gold open access. So if, as publishers and librarians, if we feel like that's the most legitimate variety of open access that there is, 80 of the articles were available gold open access. And then if you start to look at things that were green open access but not gold open access, so how many additional articles were available in an open access version that weren't available gold but they were available green, we found an additional 24 articles. So then we're up to 104 out of our 300 300 article sample. Then moving forward, we looked at what was available in our rogue systems that wasn't otherwise available in gold or green, and we found an additional 59 articles. And then if you go, sorry, the pointer is...
Make it work.
Sorry, it's just jumping. So we found 59 in the rogue system, and then if you add in, did it? Okay, sorry. So then if you add in SCIHub to complete your journal article searching, then you found an additional 115. Overall, all versions of freely accessible journals ended up over 90%. So our users could relatively easily discover about 90% of the articles in our sample. And you'll see that even though arts and humanities is not as well represented in gold, green, and the rogue systems, SCIHub makes up for it with great coverage of the arts and humanities as well. Hey, if you're going to steal articles, you might as well do it from arts and humanities journals too, right? So then we also wanted to look at, Michael told you earlier, we were looking at search location. So generally looking at how users, scholars, mostly faculty and students are actually finding this, this content. So we wanted to look at Google Scholar, Google, ResearchGate, and SCIHub as the search location for all of the articles. A little note about methodology. We did start off with Google Scholar, making a broad assumption that most academics know Google Scholar and may start with Google Scholar. Some institutions even use Google Scholar as their discovery system. So we started with Google Scholar, and we were looking at search results for our articles, and we looked at the all versions button below every article. So they collate all the versions that they think they found that Google Scholar thinks are the same article, and they put them together. And so we found the results, and then we expanded to look at all 10 versions, and we also noted the PDF view. So Google Scholar is promoting access to freely available articles and legitimate open access by directly linking to PDFs that they can find. So you'll find that on the right-hand side of search results. And we found that all versions for most articles out of Google Scholar, the overall average was 3.74. So Google Scholar's finding 3 to 4 versions of every single article. And unsurprisingly, the arts and humanities is not as well represented with only 2.5, and the life sciences much better represented with 5. And then we found that Google Scholar will provide you access as a search location to over 40% of the journal articles in our sample. So you could get to an open access version from Google Scholar for 122 of our articles. Then when we then progressed to looking at doing the same searches in Google, we found that it was the exact same number of articles that you can find through Google, 122 of our 300. And they were not always the same articles. So the 122 we found in Google Scholar were a different set than you could find in Google. So that's why users should actually search through both of them. Fewer number of title matches in Google. They don't collate the matches, but when you do article level searching here, you'll see multiple versions come up. And in the arts and humanities, it was just below 3, social sciences right at 3, and life sciences at above 3.5. So looking at these results, availability by search location in one chart. Again, Google Scholar is the blue bars, and we found 122 of our articles overall. Google with also 122. ResearchGate was 91 articles we found. And we put SCIHub on here also to underscore the total volume that you can get through SCIHub, 260. And Google Scholar and Google operate almost equally in the discoverability of this content, and ResearchGate functions really well for the social sciences. You'll see there were 36 articles found through ResearchGate in the social sciences as compared to 39 in Google Scholar and 40 in Google. And in the life sciences, it's even closer. ResearchGate does not have great coverage and content in the arts and humanities right now. So looking at the additive availability by search location again, and we've got 2 different versions we're going to go through here. Google Scholar provided access to 122 of the articles. If you then move on to Google and limit out the ones you've already found, you find an additional 32 through Google. So 154 now of our sample, so just over 50% of the content was available by just searching Google Scholar and Google. Then if you move on to ResearchGate, you'll find 8 additional articles that you didn't discover before. And then again, SCIHub, you'll end up finding basically the rest of the sample, so up to over 90% of the total articles were available if you use all 4 of these methods. Moving backwards, though, we wanted to look at if authors, faculty that are on ResearchGate and use ResearchGate as a discovery mechanism, if they actually started from ResearchGate, what was the additive availability by using ResearchGate first and then moving on to others? You would find 91 of the articles via ResearchGate, and then when you go to Google Scholar, you find an additional 54, an additional 18 from Google, and then basically the rest from SCIHub. I'll turn it over to Jason to conclude.
Okay, so John says his was the best part. I think this is the best part, although it's also a sensitive subject in some ways. So I want to be a little provocative and lead into some discussion, so we're looking forward to that. So in conclusion, it's hard to follow the rules. If you stick with the open access versions of articles, you're limited to somewhere in between 20 and 40%, depending on the source of that version. And in fact, I guess 20 to 25% on the classic rights appropriate open access. If you go into the rogue open access, which is a little potentially much less rights appropriate, you increase the number. But if you want to go just one place and get the most possible freely available articles, as a researcher who doesn't think that it's wrong to download a pirated articles, you're going to go to SCIHub. So starting with Google Scholar and supplementing that by Google is a slightly better strategy than starting with ResearchGate, but you can kind of move both ways. And even though you see 30, 20, 40%, you can get up to a higher number if you use one and then progress on to the next if need be. Again, starting with SCIHub and bypassing the legitimate search options entirely gives the quickest and best results. And obvious conclusion from that is that libraries and publishers should be concerned. If our users decide to go here instead of using the content we are licensing, that's a huge problem, one that we need to recognize and not ignore. So before I go on to some of the potential applications of this, I want to talk about one next step that we haven't taken that we think is really important, and that is to examine both OA discoverability and availability in library discovery systems. So this graph looks at the four most popular discovery systems, and the blue bars are non-articles that aren't available in open access, and the gray bars are those that are. So the question is, if you just drop that title in that discovery system, is it going to be indexed? This is not necessarily a test of OA versus non-OA, but that's the intent, is like, is OA content less well indexed in library discovery systems? That's a relatively important question. We didn't see strong trends toward that because we did have this discoverability side, although there could be something underlying this. More importantly, potentially, is how effective are library linking tools at providing the full text access to open access articles. So if you find it in your discovery system, but you don't have licensed access to it, how commonly do our systems lead to that full text? We expect the answer to be not nearly as commonly as they are actually available out there on the web, but we'd like to actually design a study to look at that in a little more detail. And I think I work for the library consortium of very small libraries, many of whom do not have site license access to a lot of this content. And I think doing this work with them, examining that some more, might open up some possibilities. Okay, so the theme of the conference, right? Roll with the times, or the times will roll over you. This theme and our presentation, I think, really fit well this year. The times led by faculty who are sharing articles which may or may not be in ways which may or may not be rights appropriate, and who feel like it's fine to download pirated papers and are going there. That's the times are pushing forward, and we need to not ignore these things. We need to recognize them and think about how we can react and respond appropriately. So I have three puns for you, and I'm going to give an example of each. The first is call our Google Scholar, ? The second is emulate ResearchGate. And the third thing to do, I guess, in response to this is to not ignore that there is a SCIHub pirate club out there. So calling Google Scholar, what do I mean? Maybe we should be linking to Google Scholar results from our open URL resolvers in order to leverage more open access full text. That is a possibility. And or drawing Scholar open access full text links into the results menu when they're available. So, now I'm having it. Okay, so This is actually, Google Scholar is doing this. They have created a plugin which allows you to highlight text, hit a button, and then pull up this sub-window on the right-hand side there. That green button, that's an open access button. So if you are a researcher and you've added this plugin, which they are now advertising in the results underneath their search results, it's really, they're making it obvious to faculty that this exists. They are leveraging and making these open access links much more visible and likely to be used by researchers. They're even going to the point where on a publisher page where it says purchase this article, they're pointing out that potentially even without selecting any text, if you hit that Google Scholar extension button, it shows you the open access version of that article instead of the one that you might pay for as a researcher. So we need to recognize that Google Scholar is leveraging these links. We need to find ways to leverage these links. And I just learned today, actually, that Elsevier has created a article-level knowledge base that indicates which of their articles are freely available and which are not. So think hybrid journals. You can't use the title and figure out whether it's open access or not because there's both kinds in there. They have an API, which is freely available to folks to potentially, if you have a DOI, you check it, and it'll say, yes, this is open access, or no, it's not. We could put an article-level link in our results pages for folks who don't subscribe to those journals but can get access to them. These are the kinds of things that I think we need to be doing to be keeping up with the times. So, second example, emulating ResearchGate. So, this is something a library is already doing. Include metadata for all faculty publications in institutional repositories, even if the OA copy is not available, and even potentially if it never will be, and allow users to request a copy through the institutional repository listing. So the text on this is small, but you'll get the idea. This is the University of Liège. This is their open access, this is their, institutional repository. They just have an abstract. The bottom of the page on the left-hand side shows that there is restricted access to this article, but there is a PDF in there. And on the right-hand side, they have a button to request a copy. Does that sound familiar? That's what you do in ResearchGate. Here's a library doing that. When you hit that button, it tells you if you're from the university, log in. If you're not, here's the rules, but you can ask the author of this article for a copy. That's what they're doing with their institutional repository. I think this is emulating the fact that ResearchGate actually covers, it has listed nearly 100% of the articles we looked at. I think that's important. Otherwise, our institutional repositories really don't cover an extensive proportion of our faculty publications. Okay, so the third example is less of an example and just something that's really, when we found this as part of doing this research, I was floored. So here's a big thing that's going on that I think that we should know about and recognize is happening. So remember, 88% of researchers do not think it is wrong to download pirated papers, and 87% of the papers are pirated and available through SCIHub. 87%, right? This is a plugin that if you go to SCIHub's site, you get, if you look for an article and it's not found, it gives you a link to install this Google Chrome extension. Now, that said, it's a developer mode, it's a little funky kind of thing, but you can, because Google has not endorsed supporting SCIHub, so they are not adding this extension into their publicly available content. But what you will notice, if you look closely, is that down, and you probably can't see the URL, but it points to the article from a Google Scholar interface in SCIHub. When you click that title there in a Google Scholar interface, you go directly to the SCIHub pirated version of that article, instead of going to where you normally, if you had the Google Scholar without the plugin, you would go to your campus's licensed access if you're on campus. This makes it extremely convenient to access 87% of the articles published in 2015 across the disciplines. That is scary to me, but also something that I think we can't ignore and need to address. So With that, I'll open it up for questions, comments, thoughts.
I'm Rob Thiessen from the University of Calgary. We're considering doing some unbundling projects where we would all of a sudden have access to fewer journal packages than we do now. So if we go ahead, would that be a major incentive for faculty and students just to switch over to SCIHub? I'm just curious about that.
I think that might be a rhetorical question.
Well, I think
Yeah. Mike.
I'm sorry. Actually, to legitimately answer your question, I think that they will find some legitimate open access when you unbundle those journal subscriptions. So if you help them, yeah. So we're not necessarily helping them right now get to this content, and as librarians, we support open access, and we're funding open access projects, and we're trying to tell our authors to publish open access. And then, in many ways, we turn around and we place barriers in front of them, or at least do not eliminate barriers to access that content. So yeah, most likely they'll just go to SCIHub, but occasionally they'll find legitimate open access versions.
I've got a silly question, but what does SCIHub get from this? What does SCIHub get from this?
So anybody else want to do it? Okay, so just a brief overview. SCIHub is actually the product of a single researcher who got fed up with lacking access. She is from Kazakhstan. She has developed this capacity, and their goal, it's here. What she gets is to remove all barriers there it is. The tagline there, to remove all barriers in the way of science. Her intent is to say, look, if you don't have access to this stuff, it causes problems. There should not be limited access to the knowledge that's being created by researchers, and therefore I want to make all this stuff free to everybody, even if that requires breaking the rules, being shut down, and doing things that really aren't okay. I didn't make the point that many people compare SCIHub to Napster as a rogue, illegal, pirated version of getting access to music, which was eventually shut down, but now has been replaced or at least adapted through iTunes and now Spotify and things that are completely different models. Disruptive technology. This is use of disruptive technology to potentially really change things. But they are looking for money to maintain the support of whatever crazy things they do to illegally get access to these articles. But other than that, I haven't heard. I think that's the main. That's her motivation. That's where it comes from.
Yep.
I had a question about, it's a legal issue, really, and that is, I don't know who's doing SCIHub, and I do believe in pushing the envelope. I think that's the only way we're going to have open access. But my question is, in that universities and their libraries represent entities, legal entities, and knowing what universities have had to go through, in some cases with course reserves, is there a possibility that if we did push the envelope with SCIHub, that we would put ourselves in the position of being sued? And are we willing to take that risk to do that? There are some people who say that we don't take enough risk, particularly the large research libraries, and that if we did, things would be a lot better for us.
I think undoubtedly we would be sued. But the second part of the question, whether we should be pushing the envelope a bit, I think that we should be pushing the envelope. I'm not sure we should be pushing the envelope in the direction of SCIHub. I think that SCIHub is it is certainly violating the rights of the authors, who in some cases, in addition to the publishers. It's also it is I think it certainly puts the university at risk if we were to try to go that far. The ResearchGate, where you have, and the other point with SCIHub is that there's pretty clear evidence that they're stealing people's passwords, and those passwords are not just providing access to the content on the library website, they're doing other things. So there's privacy implications there as well. I think that there probably are ways to think about the ResearchGate model where the author is putting the content up. They may not be putting a legitimate version up, but they are at least, the risk sort of falls on the author in that case.
Yeah, I think that the big risk is that it's the researchers who are pushing SCIHub. I want to state it specifically, we are not advocating any libraries promoting SCIHub, but it is an interesting question to ask if universities could prevent access to SCIHub by some kind of a blacklist, which I happen to have come across through my hotel Wi-Fi when putting together one of the last slides last night. Would universities do it? And if they did, would there be an uprising by the faculty who are already on that campus using this in great detail, who are saying, look, libraries, you are not serving me, providing me rapid, easy access to this stuff, even if we have license, don't do this. So we're not advocating that libraries promote SCIHub. I'm not saying to promote the Google Scholar plugin even, or the SCIHub plugin. We are saying it's out there. It's a threat, and yes, we need to be pushing the envelope and considering being a little more risk accepting in making sure that we are, hopefully, as libraries, are a part of enhancing access to the legitimate content that is out there, and recognizing that there may be a change coming in the direction of, a Napster to Spotify kind of revolution that we saw in the music industry.
Hi, my name is John Dove, and I serve on, among other things, on the NISO Discovery to Delivery Topic Committee. So this is a really good presentation. I really appreciate it. And actually, within that committee, we've begun looking at the whole question of where there's multiple places where people put stuff with the intention to share. It may be repositories or personal websites, or a funding agency may require things to be in particular places. And then looking at the 8 or 9 different discovery pathways, many of which you mentioned here, and seeing where are there barriers. So we're really looking for input such as you're providing here, and other people in the audience. So and there'll be a session tomorrow afternoon on that from the NISO Discovery to Delivery Topic Committee. But let me just mention that last week I saw an announcement of a new website, oadoi.org, and you create a link by appending to that URL a DOI, and it will find preferentially a green copy versus the article of record. And in the I'm not a technical person, but I noticed that in the comments that people had in the response to this announcement of this new URL, someone said, gee, we've embedded this into our SFX link resolver. So it sounds to me like it's creating what I would call, OA-aware link resolver, which I think is part of what you guys are all advocating for.
I would agree, and sadly, the research we did provides no evidence to support this. But my feeling is that the biggest impediment, that the biggest breakdown in the chain is between finding the result in a library discovery system and getting to an open access version of that article. Now, if you are a well-endowed institution that already has access in other ways, it's much less important to your users in terms of what they can actually do, whether you link to that open access version or not. But for institutions who are not as well, do not have as broad site license coverage, the problem of maintaining knowledge bases and maintaining links to open access content, which used to kind of make us give up because those links would keep failing and we just turned that stuff off because it just doesn't work. That was 5 years ago. This is now. There are those kinds of tools even being supported by for-profit publishers who are doing hybrid journals and want their open access content to be discovered. And if we don't find ways to make sure our users from our tools are getting to that open access content, we are, because of how much it adds to what what any given institution actually has access to, we will be pushed out completely of the process of access to the literature. And that's my great fear for us as libraries. At the same time as, well, I won't go beyond that.
So let me just say, this is not a rogue URL, by the way. So the oadoi.org, I looked, and indeed on their board is Heather Joseph of Spark, and so it's a quite legitimate organization, and they've just launched, and it's similar to some other tools that have been out there as well. It's sort of, green OA aware linking, which is.
Yeah, and I think in our efforts as librarians and even publishers and vendors, we focused on the producers of research information. So we've wanted authors to deposit their articles in our institutional repositories, so on and so forth. And I think what we're saying now is we might be at the point where we turn around and we look at the users of that information, and that will help promote the adoption of open access. So if you make it easy for people to use that content, then potentially more people will be producing that type of content.
Okay, thank you very much for attending today. I'd like to thank Jason, John, and Michael for a fantastic presentation. Thank you very much.